And I'm super excited to be here today with Robby Barbaro. Robby Barbaro is the co-founder of Mastering Diabetes with myself, and he is the co-author of the upcoming book, Mastering Diabetes from Penguin Random House. He's been living with type 1 diabetes for 18 years and has been eating a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet for 11 of those 18 years. Now, in that time, Robby has shown that he can control his blood glucose very, very closely. And he has an A1C that ranges generally between 5.6 and 6.6% at all times. And he does this while eating very large amounts of whole, unprocessed, raw fruits. Now, Robby graduated from the University of Florida in 2011, and he worked at Forks Over Knives for 6 years before turning his attention to mastering diabetes full time. Robby has a very inspiring Instagram account called Mindful Diabetic Robby, where he shares his lifestyle through pictures, recipes, videos, and documents his daily diet using Instagram stories. So thank you so much for being here with me today, Robby.
I'm really excited. This is going to be fun.
Absolutely. So let's start at the top, because I feel like a lot of people, some people know your story, some people don't know your story. So you were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes as a teenager, and you tried many diets. Can you tell our audience just a little bit about your story, and then what you learned in this process of going from one diet to the next, to the next, to the next?
Yeah, so I learned a lot, and I'm really excited to share it with everybody. I'm the youngest of 3 brothers, so there's 3 of us, and my middle brother was also diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So he was diagnosed before I was, so my family was familiar with the condition. I knew about it, but I didn't know a lot of details until I had to live with it. So there was a time period where I was complaining to my mom, hey, I think I have diabetes just like Steve. And she's like, oh, no, you don't have diabetes. Don't worry about it. And eventually I ended up finding out that I did have type 1 diabetes, and I started following the standard American diet just like I always had. So when I first was diagnosed, my parents always wanted me to have the best medical care. So they would send me and my brother to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, and I would see a nutritionist, I would see a psychologist. They would check in on us. It was very thorough. And in all that time, nobody ever talked to me about insulin sensitivity. Nobody talked to me about eating special foods to optimize my health, which in hindsight was a little bit disappointing and is really part of the reason I'm passionate about what we do at Mastering Diabetes together. So in the beginning, again, I'm following a standard American diet, and eventually my dad he was selling supplements. And so I thought, oh, you know what? That's interesting. And he explained what his part of the sales pitch was that, hey, our soil isn't good. So we need to have added nutrients. So I'm like, okay. So that was the beginning. That was the beginning journey of me starting to change my diet. It was just starting with supplements. And then eventually it got more and more sophisticated. And the bottom line is that there was a seed planted in my mind. I was in high school in Florida at this time. And there was a seed planted in my mind that it would be possible to reverse type 1 diabetes. It was a book. It didn't say exactly how, but something just changed my mind. So, you know what? I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna get everything I can to try and figure out how can I get my beta cells to produce insulin again. So this point, I was super motivated. I'm like, I really, really want to do this. And that was the beginning of the journey where I started following very strict diet. So in the beginning, it was just starting to change whether foods were organic or getting away from MSG or just processed foods. That was the first thing I started to try. And I got better. I started feeling better. My biggest symptoms as a teenager were the fact that I had constant allergies. So this is outside of diabetes. I had to take Claritin D all year round, was still getting sick. I had terrible acne, which was very frustrating as a teenager. Tried all the different treatments. And I had plantar fasciitis as well. So that was frustrating. So even as I started the beginning of changing my diet, of just getting rid of processed stuff, I started to see difference. I started to get better. But again, the whole mission here, the main reason for switching my diet is I wanted to do whatever it took to give my body a chance to heal itself. That was the goal. That's the mindset. So eventually, I start stumbling across more and more information. And I come across the Weston A. Price Foundation. And this is where I learned to start eating, raw milk was apparently better than pasteurized milk. So that was something that organization taught, and I tried that. I started to learn that, hey, you're supposed to have certain grass-fed beef is better than, the beef from the factory farms. Okay, that made sense. So I started progressing through that. And over the years, I was getting, my health was improving even when making these adjustments. And eventually, so it was good. I mean, again, any improvement, any adjustment, you see better results. I was feeling better. That's why I kept on doing it. That's what was motivating me. And then I eventually came across, again, the whole mission here is that all I'm trying to do is what can I do to heal type 1 diabetes? That's the goal. That's my mindset. And so the next thing, I just kept on getting more and more information. And eventually I came across a movie but called Raw for 30 Days. In that movie, I learned, oh, wait a minute, maybe I should try a plant-based diet. And this is where I tried a very, very low carbohydrate, plant-based vegan diet for 30 days, okay? And I learned a lot in this experiment. By truly doing it 100%, I learned so much. So in this time period, I am now a freshman at college at the University of Florida, and I start following this program. And what I did was I followed it to a T, eating no more than 30 grams of carbohydrate per day. I was eating no fruit. I was eating no dairy. I was eating basically no carbohydrates. It was lots of nuts, nut butters, lots of greens. I was getting my calories from fat. Oil was included in this as well. And during this period of time, I took the least amount of insulin I have ever taken as a person living with type 1. My total insulin usage was roughly 10 units of total insulin per day. Okay, now my total carbohydrate consumption there was, again, no more than 30 grams. So that's a 3-to-1 ratio as a person living with type 1 diabetes for my 24-hour insulin sensitivity ratio. Okay, so I'm trying that. And eventually, I just crashed. I had no energy. I felt terrible. And what I learned in hindsight is that, yes, I was taking a small amount of insulin, but that doesn't really mean anything unless you know at the same time your pancreas is starting to produce its own insulin. That's when that would make sense. But as a person living with type 1 diabetes, I've learned in hindsight now, my goal is not to take the least amount of insulin possible. My goal is to take the appropriate amount of insulin. So at this point, I'm following this diet. I'm still on this mission. What can I do to give my body the best chance of healing itself? And so again, I've tried this. I'm feeling terrible. I'm at a loss. I've hit a plateau. It's just staying at roughly 10 units per day. Nothing's happening, and I feel terrible. And I learned through a podcast about a fruit-based diet. And now this really is exciting, okay? So the premise there is, if I can follow a diet where it's the easiest on digestion, then you can free up nerve energy, and that can do healing in the body. So that was the original mindset. Okay, well, I'm going to try this. I'm going to start following this diet and see what happens. And now what happens on that diet, and what I've been doing now for 11 years, is I have become the most insulin sensitive I've ever been in my entire life. So now I'm eating well over 700 grams of total carbohydrate per day, and my total insulin usage is roughly about 38 units. You do some math there, it's roughly about 19 or so ratio. 19-to-1 is my total carbohydrate intake for 1 unit of insulin on a 24-hour period, okay? So 3-to-1 when I'm doing the low carbohydrate diet, and now today roughly 19-to-1. It varies based on the day, based on activity, but the point is it's a dramatic increase in insulin sensitivity. So back to the original question of, what did I learn through my years of trying different diets and experimenting is, number one, I learned that just cleaning up your diet in general, you see positive results. No question about it. It's like Dean Ornish talks about the spectrum, okay? And I learned, most importantly, for people living with diabetes, this importance of insulin sensitivity, and that, yes, you can do a very low carbohydrate diet. You can see steady blood glucose. You can have a reduction in medication, but it's not going to mean your overall health is better. So that was the biggest struggle. I was feeling terrible, even though my numbers were good. And then now I see I can eat all the fruit I want, and I can have excellent insulin sensitivity and excellent health all at the same time.
This is awesome. Okay, so and that's a great answer, actually. There's a lot of stuff in there. Now, would you refer to the low-fat, plant-based whole food diet that you're eating right now as being strict? And if so, why do you choose to have your food be, a subset of all the foods available, even within the plant-based world? Go into a little bit of detail about exactly what you eat and why being, a little bit more regimented is working.
Okay, that's a great question. So I personally am still committed and believe we as me and the whole type 1 community, we will figure out a solution for how to reverse this condition. It's just a matter of time. We don't know how, but we're going to solve this. And so my mindset, my goal is still to do everything I possibly can to eat the healthiest foods on the planet. That's my goal. I am 100% compliant for 11 years. I like to joke that the most toxic thing I've put in my body is arugula. And of course, arugula is not toxic, but it can, if you eat it, it can you can heat up a little bit. And I get that experience, but it's more like a cleansing effect than anything else. So, and really, just the main motivation is trying to just give the body the best chance at healing. And that's, for me, I love fruit. I think fruit is the healthiest food on the planet. I know there's a lot of science behind the health of fruit. It's very high in water content, which is important for our health. It's full of fiber. And I personally have great access to fruit. So that's really the reason I stick to it. And it's also become a pattern. I've just developed it. This is what I know how to do. This is what I do. And I just stick with it. It's become a matter of habit.
Okay, so this is great. Now, when it comes to social situations, I know that eating a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, from personal experience, can be a little bit of a pain in the butt. Whether you're going to a Super Bowl party, whether you're going to a restaurant, whether you're going out to eat with friends. So, how do you navigate social situations and business interactions while maintaining a relatively strict, food regimen?
So the biggest thing for me, the biggest shift that happened in my transition of following this lifestyle is that I do not let anybody make me feel bad for taking care of myself. So if I've done research and learned that this is what's best for me, under no circumstance, under no social situation or business situation, am I going to eat something because I think somebody else wants me to eat it, or I might hurt their feelings if I don't eat it. That just does not happen. I will not let that happen. I'm going to do whatever I choose in that situation, and that's it. So when it comes to whether it's like business meetings and whatnot, I've just set the standard that these are the foods I eat. And everybody at the company, everything I'm working with, in the past, they know that. And so one of the main strategies to handle that is to eat beforehand or eat after. So I eat a meal before I go, and then every single restaurant I've ever been to has been able to provide me with lettuce and tomatoes. And if I wanted to, I could bring a more sophisticated dressing, but I'm actually super happy with lettuce and tomatoes. I genuinely enjoy it. My taste buds have come alive. When I sit down and I chew lettuce, I can taste the fat in there. You can taste the oil that's actually in the lettuce naturally, and it tastes amazing. So business situations are super easy. When it comes to, going to a friend's house or something, or hanging out with friends, again, I'm going to bring my own. I'm going to communicate ahead of time what I'm doing. And sometimes I can play the diabetes card to my advantage. And again, once you express to somebody, hey, this is the best thing for my health, I'm living with type 1 diabetes, or my doctor recommended this, nobody's really going to argue with that and be like, oh, you shouldn't do that. So it really comes down to communication and just the willingness to say, hey, look, I'm committed to this. And you are not obligated to eat other people's food to make them feel a certain way.
Cool. I love that. Okay, let me put you in an impossible situation here real quick. You go out to a restaurant and you ask them for something that contains either lettuce and or tomatoes. And given that you don't eat any oil, you've communicated to them already, hey, please make sure that's oil free. It comes to you, it's got oil all over it. What do you do?
I kindly request that they bring me a new salad. And one thing we can do, which I've seen you do, Cyrus, is say that we're allergic to oil. And the moment you say that, they fix it in an instant. And again, you're the customer. It's a reasonable request. As long as you communicate kindly, it's their job to, serve you with what you asked for. And if you clearly communicated that and they made a mistake, then you can just kindly say, hey, can you please give me another salad? I'm allergic to oil and I really can't eat this. And they take care of it.
Yeah, I think that's actually right, because we use the term allergic to something. And just like you're saying, as soon as the wait staff hears the word allergy, whatever you want is yours. Right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's shift focus here just a little bit. Now, in the plant-based world, there's many variations of a plant-based diet. Some are low fat, some are medium fat, some are high fat. Some are low starch or no starch. Some are high starch. Some don't have very many beans and legumes in general. Some do. Some have small amounts of fruit. Some have larger amounts of fruit. So there's many different variations of plant-based diet. Give us your insight. Do they all work? Yes or no? And what's important for somebody living with diabetes to really understand?
So this is a great question. And even in this summit here, we have a range of experts and people have some differing opinions on certain topics. But in general, as long as the diet is generally low in fat, okay, like no more than 30%, like that's way, 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 way too high. Once you start getting above that, it doesn't matter if it's plant-based or animal-based, you're gonna have problems for a person living with diabetes who wants to reverse insulin resistance. But in general, these different things, hey, some starch, some fruit, or, can you eat corn? Can you not eat corn because of GMO or soy or a little bit more nuts and all that stuff. The point is that to not get lost in those little details and prevent you from sticking to a healthy diet. That's the point. So just pick one and do it. Whatever resonates with you, go ahead and do it and get to a point of 100% compliance, or at least close to 100%, and see what happens and see the results that you get. And then you can decide what tweaks to make based on the results that you're trying to achieve. So the last thing we want people to do is just throw their hands up in the air and be like, oh, even people in the low-fat world, plant-based whole food world, argue with each other. Don't get distracted by that. Don't get lost in that. The bigger picture is that if you are following a healthy diet in general, you are going to see great results, and sticking to it is the key.
Okay. So as far as people with type 1 diabetes is concerned, you have type 1, I have type 1. Give us, given your experience, what are some of the very important tips for people living with type 1 to optimize their blood glucose as far as their food is concerned?
Okay, so it doesn't matter what form of diabetes a person has, we're going to give the basic general guideline of number one, follow a low-fat diet. So low-fat diet for us is no more than 30 grams of total fat per day or a maximum of 15% of total calories per day. You keep underneath those guidelines, then you're following a low-fat diet, okay? That's number one. Number two is going to be to move your body. Regular activity on some level is extremely important for overall health and, of course, insulin sensitivity. So those are the two basics. But now, for a person living with type 1 diabetes, the most important tip I can possibly give is about insulin timing. So this is a mistake that a lot of people make. They start transitioning to this diet, they start eating more high carbohydrate foods, and they don't pay attention to insulin timing. So a person living with type 1, if you inject insulin, it does not work immediately. It takes some time for it to start actually taking glucose out of the bloodstream into the cells. And when you're eating a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, when you eat a high-carbohydrate meal, it is going to raise your blood glucose quicker than when people were eating a standard American diet full of lots of fat. It's the rate at which glucose is going to get into the bloodstream is quicker. And that's okay. That's not a problem. We just need to adjust for that. So a lot of people, they could get away with injecting and then eating very quickly when you're following a standard American diet. But that is not going to work on this approach. So the key is, when you inject insulin, you want to make sure that you wait roughly 10 to 15 minutes, but the key guideline is that your blood glucose is 120 and going down before you start eating. So sometimes that might take an extended period of time. Somebody might start out at 150. Maybe their blood glucose is 150 and they want to eat lunch. So let's say they need 5 units of insulin. They inject the 5 units of insulin. They could test themselves 15 minutes later, and their blood glucose might be 160 because it was going up. So you would have to wait another 10, 15, 20 minutes if you want to get an optimal blood glucose reading. Again, sometimes because of life, you don't have time to do that. It doesn't make you have to eat for whatever reason, but that's okay. Just know that maybe you'll see a bigger spike in that situation, but don't get frustrated. Don't blame the carbohydrates. It was simply insulin timing. Remember, people who don't have diabetes, their pancreas is working perfectly, okay? There's insulin just sitting there ready to go. They eat food and the insulin does its job, keeps their blood glucose in a very healthy range. Us people living with type 1, we have to compensate for that. So we have to make sure that the insulin is working for the timing that we're actually eating the food. So it's really a key tip. And the other tip for people living with type 1 that's very important, and what I've learned in my own personal experience, is really truly being aware of how many carbohydrates you're eating at a specific meal. So you can do this in one of two ways. We teach go-to meals. So if you're having a repeated meal, so you know for breakfast you have 3 bananas, 2 apples, and a pear. That's the same breakfast every day. Even if the foods are a little bit different sized, it's okay. You know generally how much carbohydrates are in that meal, and you'll know how much insulin to inject. But if you're just eating food freely and not really thinking about it, just kind of like the guess and check game, it's going to be difficult to get your blood glucose in a perfect range, especially as your insulin sensitivity increases, because your units of insulin, there's going to be a much bigger factor there. If you miss by a unit or something, you might be a little bit higher. So really being aware, you can also use a food scale. I like to use a food scale. At any given meal, if I know the exact amount of carbohydrate I'm eating, and I'm doing step 1 and step 2, I'm eating a low-fat diet, I'm moving my body, I have complete predictability and complete control what is going to happen to my blood glucose after I eat that meal. And that's really empowering, and I really want every other type 1 to have that same feeling.
Okay, great. So now how about you give us some pro tips for people living with type 2 diabetes? How can they optimize their blood glucose using maybe similar strategies or slightly different strategies?
Okay, so a person living with type 2, again, we got to do the same foundational teachings of number 1, following a low-fat, plant-based, whole food diet, and number 2, moving your body. But then, once we get beyond that, and you're talking about a person living with type 2 diabetes, one pro tip that I have, just want to share in specific beyond what I think a lot of experts have talked about in this summit, is the importance of a C-peptide test. So people come to us living with type 2 diabetes, sometimes they've had it for 10, 15, 20 years, and they start seeing these testimonials on our YouTube channel or from Forks Over Knives or other places, and they're like, wow, I can reverse type 2 diabetes, and they're asking themselves, is this possible for me? They're kind of questioning it. They're really like, I'm not sure. And they're taking insulin, they're taking oral pills, and they're really questioning it. And one thing you can do to really find out how well your pancreas is working as a person living with type 2 is to go and get a C-peptide test. The easiest way to do it is simply get a fasting C-peptide test. And the way this works is C-peptide is produced in a 1-to-1 ratio with insulin. So they're produced together, then they break off, insulin does its job, C-peptide goes, floats around, and does pretty much nothing. But it's still a marker, an indicator of how much insulin you're producing, and it's a very easy and affordable test. You can go and order it online, okay? And you just go to requestatest.com. You can pay, I think it's roughly $60 to order from either LabCorp or Quest, and you can take the paper in, you can get the test, you don't need your doctor. And the point is, the general range is about 0.8 to about 3.4. That's like the general range, okay? If you're a person living with type 2, and you go and you see your numbers in range, that's a very good sign that you are producing plenty of insulin, okay? So all you need to do is start living a lifestyle where you get to maximize your insulin sensitivity and make it so that insulin you're using can manage your blood glucose without the need of exogenous insulin and without the need of oral medications. So it's very empowering when you get that information. Okay, wait a minute, wow, I am producing insulin. Like, it's there, my body's doing it. Now I just gotta optimize. And it can also be empowering if you're a person, you've been living with type 2 for a long time, and maybe your pancreas is exhausted, okay? You go and you get a C-peptide, and it's 0.4, it's 0.2. That's low. So for example, my C-peptide is less than 0.1. So it's in a non-detectable range of how much insulin or C-peptide I'm producing. That's very much characteristic of anybody living with type 1 diabetes. I'm producing pretty much zero insulin. Now, you're living with type 2, you go and you get this test, and you find out that you're in that camp as well. That's okay. Okay, so now we can reset what are realistic goals, and you don't have to beat yourself up or get upset if things aren't moving as quickly as you want, you're not reducing your insulin as much as you see other people doing. So if you have that objective information, then you can come in, reset your goals, and be like, okay, now my goal here is to optimize my health, to really use the appropriate amount of insulin that I need to inject exogenously in addition to what my pancreas is producing, and your focus is on overall health and just having the best life you possibly can living with type 2.
It's great. Okay. Yeah. I can't actually stress just how important this C-peptide measurement is. What you were explaining is just spot on, because I see this over and over and over again with people in our coaching program and people, in the outside world who, have a really difficult time controlling their blood glucose living with type 2 and end up resorting to oral medications that sometimes don't even do anything, because the problem is not in your muscle. The problem's not in your liver. The problem's in your pancreas. And unless you get that C-peptide measurement, you would just never know that that's the case.
And I'd like to add to that, like you said, we have people come in our program and sometimes they're doing everything right and they're struggling. And this happens a lot with also people living with type 1.5 diabetes. So that's also a reality. And a big tip for anybody they're doing everything right, and for some reason things aren't just clicking, another important thing might be to get a diabetes antibody panel, okay? So if somebody's living with type 1.5 diabetes, that is characterized by having some antibodies present and a low C-peptide test. So you go get that panel, and a diabetes antibody panel will include a GAD antibody being tested, a IA2 antibody, and also insulin antibodies. And so a lot of medical professionals make a mistake of only testing the GAD antibody. And so that would be a mistake I can share from my own personal experience. If somebody were to only test my GAD, they would be missing some information, because I have very recently had this test done. My insulin antibodies were negative, my GAD antibody was negative, my IA2 antibody was high. So that's the antibody that I'm struggling with, and why my pancreas is not producing sufficient insulin.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. This is awesome. So, okay, let's switch topics just a little bit here. You are a master of buying produce. I've literally never seen anybody that's better than you. I consider myself to be pretty good, but in comparison to you, I'm a child. So share with our audience some tips about how you save incredible amounts of money while buying very large quantities of really fresh produce. Give us an idea of what you do.
I appreciate the kind words there. I am very passionate about the food tasting amazing. So that's something we teach a lot in our coaching program, but what we do at Mastering Diabetes is that on this diet, there is no sacrifice. The food is amazing. And part of that comes down to sourcing, to getting the best ingredients. And also a big part of it comes down to using amazing spices and herbs and stuff, which Cyrus is an expert at. But when it comes to getting good produce, what I have learned is that, number one, taking the time and the energy to go and see what is available in your area. That's key. That's step number one. So you might not live near a wholesale market. We'll talk about that shortly. You might just live in a town where you have, a couple grocery stores and that's it. But in that case, go to every single grocery store. So when I was in college in Gainesville, Florida, there were several grocery stores in that town. There was mainstream markets. There were some Asian markets. I went to every single one, and I would find out that different places had better items. So one place had got really good papaya. One place had really good local persimmons. Another place had, better greens, better vegetables. And some of the major supermarkets, there are some supermarkets that, they get their cantaloupe from one specific farm, and then another major supermarket gets it from a different farm. And I know it might seem overwhelming to I have to go to all these different stores, but it's initially just to find out which ones are the best. Then you dial into maybe 1 to 3 grocery stores, and that's it. So yes, there's some upfront work of sourcing what is the best in your area, and that can take some time, but it's worth it. So you see behind me all this produce, and I go once per week. I go to a wholesale produce market in downtown Los Angeles. I get up early in the morning, and I go there, number one, not just because I save a lot of money, but the number one reason I go there is because I have the most options. I can pick the best items. I get the highest quality, best tasting fruits. So I can go to a lot of different vendors at the wholesale market, and there are lots of Atulfo mangoes right now. So you see the yellow mangoes behind me. That's an Atulfo mango, also known as a champagne mango. There are probably at least 10 different brands at the wholesale market. And through experience and through experimenting, I know that there's one specific brand. It's the purple box. It's called Amanda Panda. We served them at our retreats in the past. This is the best tasting mango that's available to me in this area. And same thing with papaya. You'll notice that there's different stickers. And so there's this one brand that come in a black box, and those are the best tasting papayas. So the point is sourcing. So spending the time to go look and see where the options are, and then experimenting and really paying attention to, okay, what sticker did I buy? How did I like this one? That's an important tip. Another important tip is getting to know the people who you can buy your produce from. So that's produce managers. Sometimes that's people at a farmer's market. Sometimes that might be getting to know the people who operate at the wholesale market. And when you get to know them, they know who you are, they know what you want, and oftentimes they give you deals on ripe produce, okay? So what they call seconds at the grocery store or at a wholesale market is usually just a little bit damaged, a little bit bruised, or it might just be ripe, and they can't sell ripe stuff. And so you get to take advantage of that and save a lot of money by buying seconds, but also the quality is good because you know it's going to ripen. So that's a big deal. And again, there's also an important tip of learning how, when it comes to fruit specifically, how to ripen it. So a lot of times people don't know how to ripen a mango. So most mangoes should have a little bit of give, and most people don't wait that long. Same thing with papayas. You want to have a papaya that has some bounce on it and it's a bright color. You don't want it to be hard as a rock. So same thing with nectarines and plums. They want to have a little bit of give. So experimenting with letting your food ripen a little bit more can have a huge impact on how much you enjoy it.
Okay. This is great. All right. So here's the last question that we ask everyone. I'm going to ask it to you. What's the number one challenge that you see people face when it comes to lifestyle change? And what do you recommend for somebody to overcome this particular challenge?
Okay, so I think the number one challenge is not having a community, not having a people to do this with. If you go out there and you try and do this all by yourself, you're going upstream. It's going to be a challenge. But if you start having some friends, in person is great, but even if they're just digital, even if you have people to reach out to on Facebook, or you make a buddy on Instagram, you start DMing a friend on Instagram, that is a game changer. So having community, having people to do this with, is really, really important, because our environment out there is challenging. We live in a world where people are encouraging and celebrating unhealthy behaviors, and then if you show up to a party or something and you're trying to eat healthy, they make fun of you and say, oh, you're eating rabbit food. It genuinely is a challenging environment out there. And if you can have a sense of community and a sense of pride, hey, I'm gonna stick with this. I'm doing this cleanse, or I'm doing this diet with my friend. We're doing this together. You can sort of talk about the challenging situations, how you dealt with them, and it can become very, very helpful. So you definitely seek out a community, whether it's online, whether it's in person. You can find meetup.com. You can find groups to see people and share healthy meals. This whole diet is becoming much, much more popular all over the world. So definitely finding people there is a great place. There's, Facebook groups where you can meet up, and, lots of Instagram people. They announce meetups whenever they're in certain towns. So really staying connected and having a community is essential.
I think that's a great response, actually. And I can say from my personal experience, and I think from your personal experience, that, when you are part of a community of other people who are eating not only similarly to you, but it just makes your life easier. It just really does, right? Everything in terms of, it starts to validate your experience as a human being. You're like, oh, I experienced this problem when blank, and someone else says, oh, I get the exact same thing. My blood glucose tends to spike a little bit after exercise, as an example. People are like, yeah, let me help you solve that problem. And then all of a sudden it becomes this group think effort where everybody's like, great, let's work together because we all want the same end result. So totally. I think your advice is awesome. So thank you for all of your thoughts here. You've been a pleasure to work with for many years now, and I absolutely love your story. I love how much of a pro you have become at managing type 1 diabetes through a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet. And, I know there's so many people in our community that just absolutely love your message. So thank you for what you do, and keep it going strong, man. You're killing it right now.
Thank you, man. This has been so much fun, and doing this together is it's unbelievable. No words can describe how much fun this is, and I hope if somebody's this far into the interview and you're listening to this, please make sure to check out all our other interviews. Check out Cyrus's interview. This summit is full of nothing but pure gold.